I recommend that you authorize OPEGA to finish its assignment by determining how so many poor decisions could possibly have been made under management that was intended to exercise, quote, reasonable judgment.
They approach requested change with negativity, and their comfort level cannot be threatened. And that level is status quo. So that's what NEPRA's got to watch out for as they get deeper into it. The demand for greater stewardship by NEPRA is now. So the onion might have to be peeled back a ways to see what is actually going on out there.
In the most recent decade, NEPRA has the appearance of developing a culture of cronyism, lack of transparency, and flawed stewardship of tax dollars while implementing passenger rail service in Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts.
I really take umbrage at the statement that there's an appearance of cronyism. I heard a bunch of trite expressions. Where's the beef? You need to peel the onion. Well, it's time to peel the onion on, quote, cronyism, close quote. I have no connections to rail. The point is that every member of that board has no connections to transportation policy except the ex officio members.
The state of Maine should be very proud of the staff, the way they manage the service, and the leadership of Patricia Quinn and her team, because they have set a standard nationwide for effectiveness of passenger rail service. We, the state of Maine, have put together a great group in that regard.
I've also listened to many of the comments today. I would point out that no one at NEPRA has an axe to grind. No one at NEPRA has a reason to have chosen a particular spot versus another spot, except based upon the information provided to it. Several of the people you've heard from today and perhaps in the past, including unsolicited comments, do have an interest, and they have a very personal interest which they certainly have the complete right to express and should express. But I think that what you have here is a situation where you have NEPRA, which is operating in as objective a manner as it can, and not just the board, but also we have an executive director that has operated above and beyond the call of duty in almost every respect to make decisions that are legal, that are necessary, and that are reasonable.
I work a lot with Amtrak. I work with them on a variety of different levels. I work with them at the superintendent level, which is the people that run the Downeaster service. At the regional level, we were dispatched out of the Northeast Division, and I work with them out of the corporate level in Washington, D.C. And Amtrak, has a bad rap for being rigid. And I was listening to some of Mr. Snyder's experiences that he had working with VRE, and they can be tough. But I also want you to know that we have really developed a great working relationship with Amtrak and have pushed the envelope with them so that they are creative, they are responsive, they do try new things, and we work on that very hard. For instance, we were the very first service in the country to have Wi-Fi service. We worked with Amtrak to pilot e-ticketing. We were, up until a year ago, we were the only Amtrak service to have our own food service. We were the first to implement recycling on board. We do events that nobody does, and when they introduced pets last year, we asked them to modify the policy because we wanted to offer pet access at all stations, even though they were unstaffed, and they allowed us to do that. And Natalie Bogart and I just got back from Chicago last night. There was a 3-day meeting of railroad officials, including Amtrak officials, where Natalie and I and many others worked together to push Amtrak to change some of the way they do their marketing and to allow the state-supported routes to have more access so we can market better to passengers so that we can drive revenue and improve customer service. And as it relates to those meetings, there's another meeting in Chicago that I'm missing today, but it's working with the states on that executive committee of the state's State Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee, which we call SAPER-C. And I participated in that in a long time because I fight very hard to make sure that the Downeaster is treated differently than other routes. We're not we're not integrated with other Amtrak routes. We don't interface with other Amtrak routes. And I work diligently to make sure that we're charged a fair price and that we get good value for our service. I'm on their back all the time. And as was mentioned earlier, I work with other states to leverage that. And in fact, we had a meeting yesterday with the brand new Amtrak president, third day on the job, sat down and met with him to talk about some of the concerns we have about costing an Amtrak and how important it is for them to understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all and that costs need to be fair and effective.
I have attended many of the NEPRA board meetings, and yes, things are rubber stamped. It's just done. Know that, because it is rubber stamped. The executive director, again, top in what she does, but when she puts forth something, the members of the board of directors all say aye.
I am offended by the statement of rubber stamping. Anyone who has ever served on a board with me knows that I do not rubber stamp. I am very critical about financial affairs. I do not rubber stamp. I ask very critical questions, and I expect to get answers. And I get good answers from the staff, who are second to none. And what really pains me is to see how they are being taken down in the mud because of people with their own personal interests, whether they live close to the track or otherwise. I realize and I respect Mr. Sullivan's view, and he has a very legitimate view. If I lived next to the track, I would be completely upset as well. I didn't choose to buy my house there. I chose to stay in Lewiston, Auburn, where I hear a rail service tooting its horn. But we have tried, as a board, as an agency, to reach out to the neighbors. We have a lot to be proud of in the state of Maine about our transportation authority. Peers from throughout the country say this is the best. Can we do things better? Of course. I would be arrogant to say otherwise. I'm from Lewiston, Auburn. We don't think that we're the best. We think that we have a ways to go, and we are very much mindful of that. We are among the top 3 in the country. We had a blip last year. We're coming back gangbusters. As Patricia said, we had a record quarter for ridership. We've learned from the lessons. I don't think we could have done anything differently. Should we have picked Amtrak, as one gentleman suggested? What were our alternatives? If you read the federal statute, you have 2 alternatives. You either use Amtrak or you use a rail service that the owner of the line permits. I don't know if any of you have ever negotiated with Pan Am, which was formerly called Guilford, and suggested that there would be a third party to operate the rail. We have, and they have not seen fit to say, okay. And I understand it. That's their privilege. But what are we supposed to do? Not operate a railroad, or say, Amtrak, you're supposed to operate it, or just sue Guilford or Pan Am? And there have been lawsuits with Guilford and Pan Am, I think. That was even before my time, so I don't even want to go there. So on the Amtrak, well, what are we doing to watch the public money? Well, Patricia talked about, but she was too modest to talk about her instrumental role in dealing with the state's negotiation with Amtrak. If it's only the state of Maine and only NEPRA negotiating with Amtrak, we don't have much leverage. But what Patricia has to her credit is she's on the executive committee of the State Advisory Council. And I'm very bad with names in this field, so I apologize. It's hard for me to remember my own name at times. But what she is, she's on the negotiating committee. And we, as a state, as an agency, have reaped a lot of benefits. It's sort of like, and I hate to make the analogy, it's sort of like we box above our weight class because we have effective leaders. It's the same thing in the Senate. We have very effective senators, and they do a lot for the state. And one of the things that our senator did, Senator Collins, through working with us, is make sure that money, federal money, would continue to help subsidize the rail. So, you know, we're fortunate in this state to have a great staff and a great organization, and I hate to see us get carried down in the mud because of some complaints and concerns that just are not legitimate. We have tried as best as we can to deal with the public. Can we do it better, as I said? Yes. Should we make more presentations to the Transportation Committee? Yes. Does this warrant a full-scale investigation by the committee? No. You've had a great investigation done. I was interviewed, a bunch of people were interviewed. They tried to peel away the metaphor of the proverbial layers of the onion. I hope they weren't crying when they were doing that. But, and I hope we don't have to cry anymore. Let's move forward on an up path, and the path and this very, very solid foundation that Senator Muskie, Senator Collins, Senator King, and all the past administrations and current administrations have created. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, sir.